So I'm delighted to welcome everybody to the 10th annual Wheeler Lecture of the Department of Computer Science and Technology. So the department was previously known as the Computer Laboratory, and then before that as the Mathematical Laboratory. And David Wheeler was very much part of this right back even at the earliest computer that the group was associated with, the EDSAC. David Wheeler was a pioneer of computing from the 1940s, in other words, and he remained an active member of the department right up to his death in 2004. So many of us were very, very happy to have known him. Before I turn to introducing our speaker, Professor Daniela Ruth, I'm just going to introduce Joyce Wheeler, who was married to David, but was also a pioneer of computer science in her own right, having been one of the first users of the EDSAC for scientific computing right back in 1955 as an applied mathematician, using it for astrophysics, and then later working with genetics and so on. So normally we would be in person and we would be going out for dinner with Joyce after the meeting. Very sad that we're not going to be able to do that. And Joyce, we now owe you 2 dinners. But I'll hand over to Joyce now.
Hello, everybody. It's lovely to know so many people can join us again this year. Last year, of course, was the first time it was done on Zoom. And I said then how delighted David would have been to have had this facility. And I look forward to having dinner as promised in due course. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Joyce. So as Joyce said, it is a great advantage now to be able to actually have many more of you virtually present than we would have physically present, because there's too many people who've registered for this to fit into even our bigger lecture theatre. And I think that's because we've got such an exciting speaker today, Professor Daniela Ruth. I'm going to only introduce her very briefly because I hate taking time away from the speaker, but I want to just say that she's the Andrew and Anna Viterbi Professor of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science and Director of the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, which is better known as CSAIL at MIT. She earned her PhD in computer science from Cornell, and before being at MIT, she was professor in the computer science department at Dartmouth College. She has a huge string of awards and so on. As I say, don't really want to take time away from her to go through all of those. You can find that on her Wikipedia page, no doubt. Her research has touched all sorts of areas, wireless, distributed and mobile systems, but her focus is now on robotics. So we're very pleased to welcome her, and the virtual invitation to speak comes with an invitation to actually physically visit Cambridge when that becomes possible again, and we very much look forward to that possibility. So without further ado, I will hand over to Professor Daniela Ruth. Daniela, would you like to?
Thank you, Anne, for this very warm introduction. I will take you up on visiting. Thank you also for inviting me to dinner. I will remember that. All right, so let me start by saying what a great honor it is to be speaking in this distinguished lecture series named after a preeminent member of the computer science community. I was recently reading about David Wheeler and his work, and I read that his early work in the 1950s, when he used the EDSAC computer to solve a differential equation that was related to gene frequencies. That work represented the first use of a computer for a problem in the field of biology. And this is inspirational to all of us who are working toward developing computation that interacts with the physical world. Now, let me tell you that if I go back to the beginning of my, my thoughts about computing, as a kid, I loved the science fiction books of Jules Verne and the movies of Jacques Cousteau. And some years later, after I became a professor and I learned how to make and code robots, I met a student who also loved Jules Verne books and Jacques Cousteau movies. And we decided to build an underwater robot together. It was our own version of the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea robot machine. And so we call this robot Amour. And this stood for Autonomous Modular Optical Underwater Robot. But building this robot was really about love. Amour was lovable, agile, nimble. It moved elegantly like an underwater helicopter. It took beautiful photos and it could transmit them over high resolution video. All of these capabilities were enabled by innovative ideas at the intersection of engineering and computation. Now, one very hot summer day off the coast of Singapore, we decided to see just how fast Amour could go. And we were feeling very confident that day. So we took off the safety components of the robot to give it more juice. And then off the robot went. And I should tell you that it took us 3 years to develop this robot. And this was our only unit. And so then we waited and waited and waited. But Amour did not return. We lost Amour and we were devastated. But the thing about science and computer science is that the first copy of an invention takes enormous amounts of time to develop, and subsequent versions take much less time. And it is also true that great failures teach us great lessons. So we went back to the lab, and within 90 days, we made 3 improved versions of this robot. And then with great hope, we took these new versions of the robot to the sea and we watched them swim and make flips. And then we began to imagine even more extensive and better views of what such an undersea robot might look like. And that's how we got to building our soft robot fish, Sophie. This is a robot with a soft tail that can flip back and forth for swimming. And this robot fish is very agile. It can change the swimming direction in about 100 milliseconds, which is the same as physical fish. Now, this is called the escape maneuver because it allows little fish to escape from the big fish who want to eat them. And so we took Sophie to the ocean where we swam with it. And this is me next to the robot. And we watched it glide past beautiful corals. And we saw it photograph many schools of fish with its camera. And our fish even found Nemo. So it took us 3 years to make Amour, 2 months to make 3 copies of Amour. And today we can make the soft robot fish in a few days. And this rapid pace of change and of technology may sound familiar to many of you because just 2 decades ago, computation was a task reserved for the expert few. Computers were large and expensive and hard to access. A person really needed a level of expertise in order to know what to do with them. But all that changed with a smartphone. The smartphone democratized computation. Computation has become so normal, we don't even notice how central it is to all aspects of our lives. And this raises an important question. In a world so changed by computers that help us with cognitive work, what might it look with robots that help us with physical work? How much work could we offload to machines to save lives and to increase the quality of our lives? For example, I believe that autonomous cars will eventually ensure that there will be no road fatalities, and they will give all of us and our parents and our teenage kids a higher quality of life and the ability to go anywhere, anytime. Now imagine driving home from work in your autonomous car, knowing that your vehicle can get you there safely and can make your commute relaxing. You stop at the grocery store to pick up groceries. And when you walk in the door, you hand your dinner menu to a robot at the door. And a few minutes later, the robot gives you a box with all the things you need. And when you get home, You pass the box to your kitchen robot, and you might even let your kids help with cooking, because if they make a mess, the robotic house cleaner will help sweep the mess. Now, I know this sounds like one of those cartoons about a future that never quite comes to pass, but this future is not that far off. Today, robots have already become our partners in industrial and domestic settings. They work side by side with people in assembly plants and in operating rooms. They mow our lawns, they vacuum our floors, they even milk our cows. And in a few years, they will touch even more aspects of our lives. And this work, this progress is greatly enabled by computation. And within computation, by three interrelated fields. We have robotics, which puts computation in motion, giving machines the ability to move. We have artificial intelligence that enables machines to see, to hear, and even communicate like humans. And then we have machine learning, where we learn from the past and from data, and we make predictions on the data. So how do all these things apply to building machines that help us with cognitive and physical work? Well, specifically, robots are made of a body and a brain. And for every task we need to do, we need to have a body capable of that task, and we need a brain computation capable of controlling the body to deliver on that task. And so for the rest of the talk, I would like to discuss the body and the brain of robots. Let me start with the body. And let me start by showing you this picture, which is the first industrial robot called the Unimate. This robot was introduced in 1961 and was invented to do industrial pick and place operations. By 2021, by now, the number of industrial robots reached over 30 million. And these industrial robots are masterpieces of engineering that can do so much more than people do. Yet these robots remain isolated from people on the factory floors because they're large and heavy and dangerous to be around. So what would it take to have robots working side by side with humans? Well, the answer is better brains and better bodies. Now, by comparison, organisms in nature are soft and compliant and so much more dexterous. Just look at this octopus and look at how compliant its body is, how agile this organism is to execute a variety of tasks. We should have soft robots that can be equally dexterous and agile. Or we have systems like the elephant trunk that are able to exhibit delicacy. Just look at how gentle this elephant is as it picks up the banana from the child. And yet the elephant trunk can move with great strength to whip a challenger. And so we'd like to have robots that can do the same. Also, natural systems are able to explore compliantly the environment. Just look at how this elephant is moving along the wall, feeling the wall, and sweeping to search for food. Can we have machines that have the same type of capabilities? This would make a huge difference in disaster relief. Now, these examples I have just shown you inspire us to rethink what a robot is. And I would like to note that while the past 60 years have defined the field of industrial robots and empowered hard-bodied robots to execute complex assembly tasks in constrained industrial settings, I believe the next 60 years will be ushering in robots in human-centric environments, and our time with robots helping us with cognitive and physical tasks. And I would also like to observe that while the industrial robots of the past 60 years have been mostly inspired by the human forms, they are robot arms or humanoid forms, the next stage of robots will be inspired by the animal kingdom with its form diversity, by our own built environment, by our imagination, and the robots will have very broad application potential. Now, in the recent past, the robotics community has begun to dream up of a new type of robot we call soft robot. And here you see some examples of soft robotic hands, soft robotics octopi, and various other unusual shapes for robotic machines. These are examples that show you that the future machines can come in a variety of shapes and materials. But what is soft really? Well, soft refers to the body of the robot. Soft materials are key enablers for creating soft robots. And the way to measure how soft a machine's body is with Young's modulus, which measures stress to strain. And we observe that traditional robotics materials like plastics and metals have moduli that are orders of magnitude higher than those of natural organisms. And so we define soft robots as systems capable of autonomous behavior that are primarily composed of materials with moduli in the same range as biological systems. For example, Sophie, the soft robotic fish I already introduced, is an example of such a robot. The robot has a tail that undulates and helps propel the robot forward. It also has dive planes that control the swimming depth. And so I'd like to explain soft in the context of the tail of the robot. The tail of the robot is enabled by something we call fluidic power soft actuation. And fluidic power soft actuation essentially consists of a cavity that is augmented with an extensible constraint. The cavity can expand when we put fluid in it, air or water or any other form of fluidic substance. As the because there is the inextensible constraint, as we put fluid inside this cavity, it expands, it forms a curvature, and by controlling this curvature, we can control the shape of the robot. So that's the basic principle of a fluidic actuator. And here you can see how the fishtail is built with essentially two chambers that are connected by the inextensible constraint. When we and then we have a pump. The pump regulates the flow of water from one chamber to the other. When the flow of water is about the same, the fishtail moves evenly from left to right, and the robot translates forward. When we put more water in the right chamber, the robot turns right. When we put water in the left chamber, the robot turns left. So we can write the computer program that controls how this fish moves by figuring out how much water to put in each chamber. And so here is the fish in action again, using this approach to control. And you can see our team lovingly following the fish. We control the fish using a gaming style controller that we adapted for underwater operation. We are able to give the fish high-level commands, and the fish executes them doing the local control on board. The fish also has a camera. With this camera, it can see the environment. This allows the fish to avoid obstacles, but it also allows the fish to collect very valuable data about the underwater ecosystem, so that essentially this fish could become a tool for marine biologists. So that's one idea we have to bring machines closer to biological systems. Another idea, also inspired by nature, has to do with observing that organisms in nature are made of cells that combine in different ways to make organisms such as snakes and ants, and organs such as lungs and hearts. And so we can ask whether we could invent robotic cells that could be composed in different ways to make different robot organisms. The robot could have the best shape required by the task. For instance, a snake to crawl through a tunnel, or a three-handed machine for a factory floor. So how far can we go with this idea? Here's a simulation of about 2 decades, that's about 2 decades old, that shows how a couch robot could become a dog robot. And in this case, the cell is a cube that expands and contracts by a factor of 2. The simulation shows that the computation solution for doing this task, for doing a change of shape from dog to couch, is more or less solved. But we still need to make this unit cell, and we do not know how to make it at a scale where the couch will be comfortable to sit on. So you might ask yourself, who needs a dog couch? Well, you might not need a dog couch, but what if I told you that in the future, I could give you a bag that has smart sand in it and that has any tool you want and can give it to you on demand? For example, in this conceptualization, the bag's smart sand makes a copy of a wrench. And when you're done with using the wrench, you could push it back in the bag, recycle the particles to make the next tool you want. Well, today's robot cells are still too big to make a comfortable dog couch, and we cannot make the smart sand yet. But we can make simpler things like shape-shifting trusses and support beams. And this is an example from my lab called the M-block. The M-block is a 2-inch by 2-inch cube that can move by pivoting. And the secret to the movement is a flywheel inside the robot that spins very fast, and then a braking mechanism stops the cube suddenly. The stored momentum then propels the cube forward. And so the M in the name stands for magic, because with no externally visible moving parts, we feel like the robot moves as though by magic. And so to get from something like an M-block, which we already have, to dog couch, we need to make these robotic cells smaller and smaller, more like materials. We need to bring materials and computation and machines closer together. We need to advance making, and we are already doing that. We also need the algorithmic basis for doing the control. Now, since we can't have yet modular couches, we can enable other applications for self-reconfiguring modular robots. For example, we can have floating robotic boats that can carry people and goods. And imagine a fleet of self-assembling boats that can make autonomous floating platforms, maybe to enable people to gather for events or for a pop-up market, or to function as a water-based bus stop. And in fact, these robot boats could self-assemble just on time when the passengers arrive at a bus stop, as you can see in this simulation. And we can do even more. We can augment these robotic boats with arms for autonomous trash collection and other types of operations. This is a vision we are building with support from the city of Amsterdam, and we are making progress. In fact, we have built these boats at quarter scale, and here you can see a pool experiment where these rectangular boat platforms are able to change shape, connect to one another, and then navigate by combining their respective controllers and thrusters. And we can make them more tidy on the top, so we can have space to place people and goods. And we can make this boat at a variety of scale. Here you can see the boat at half scale. We are in the process of testing a full-scale boat that we have developed and built in Amsterdam. These boats have a sophisticated autonomy package that involves map making, localization, perception, obstacle detection, and avoidance. Essentially, anything that you would package in a self-driving car is also available to make the brain of this boat. And so this is exciting because if we can deploy these modular boats, these modular autonomous solutions on waterways, we will free up a lot of our roadways for other activities, and we will decrease pollution. So we talked about building machines inspired by the natural world, either in the form of organisms or in the form of cellular systems that can assemble to form complex mechanisms. We also have other other options for thinking about making useful machines. And this is with inspiration from computation and engineering. This has to do with using computation to automate the design and fabrication process. So while we continue to work on robot cells, we are also developing the coding tools that automate the design of custom robots and the making tools that automate their fabrication. And this takes us closer to a vision where people will have a robot for any task, just like we have a smartphone app for any task today. And so here's the vision. We would like to empower users to automate tasks in their lives. So for instance, let's take a user called Alice. Let's say she wants a playmate for a cat for when she's at work. To do so, Alice would go to a new kind of store called 24-hour robot manufacturing with a rough idea of what a playmate she wants. And at the store, she would explore the design space for her device using an intuitive interface. Once she decides, 24-hour robot manufacturing will fabricate the robot at an affordable price point, and the cat will have a playmate while Alice is away at work. Now, today, the computational advancements of making are lacking, but if we can have the same advancements in making as we've had in coding, we would be right on the edge of having the ability to create, any of us, one-of-a-kind robot for any task. My research group is working on this problem, and I'd like to illustrate it in the context of an example where, let's say, Alice wants to play chess with a robot. And so the solution is to have a program decode the instruction, I want the robot to play chess with me, much like a compilation process, determine behaviors such as pick up piece, move piece, drop off piece, and then send off the aggregated components and designs to be fabricated and assembled. So we have addressed this problem from the point of view of creating origami robots. Origami robots are designed flat, like planar structures, and they are folded, and creating them is inspired by the art of origami. And so here is the origami robot that can play chess with you. And that was designed in a somewhat automated but not fully automated way. Now, in the process of making such foldable robots, one of the most time-consuming operations is folding a flat structure into a 3D structure. So we asked whether it is possible to automate the folding of robots so that the robots can make themselves. And this is an example where we have a robot that starts out as a flat piece of plastic. And when you put it on a heating pad, the plastic self-folds into a fully fledged robot that can run, carry a load, and travel at 4 body lengths a second. And when you're done with it, it can even go to a recycling bin where it will dissolve itself. And this is important because there is a huge problem with the waste generated by electronics. And electronics can be recycled, and they're toxic when they're discarded in developing countries. So we would like to make machines that will not create such a lot of electronic waste. The robot itself can be extended in so many ways. You can give this robot codes that allow it to move in different ways. So for instance, here you can see the robot getting a basic code that allows it to walk. We call this the walkbot. When the robot is done with walking, it can go to the closet to get a second outfit that can make it move faster. We can also get the robot to roll and do different activities using codes that are task specific, that are designed for each task. And we also have a method to shed the code once the robot is done with a task. Now, we can make origami robots at all scales, but even at the small scale, we can imagine interesting applications. And one we have considered is creating a mini surgeon robot to remove button batteries that people swallow accidentally. So swallowing button batteries is dangerous because they create holes in the tissue very fast within an hour. And right now, the only way to remove the batteries is through surgical intervention. So our origami robot embodies the possibility of a mini surgeon that can be packed in an ice pill, and then it gets swallowed. And when it arrives in the stomach, the ice melts, the robot deploys, and it can do tasks. For instance, here is an example of how you might make a mini surgeon robot. You can see the ice pill. The ice pill has a little magnet in it, and using an external magnetic field, we can locate the robot, and we can direct it to where we want it to go. And so the robot was directed to the battery, picked it up. The idea is to then remove it through the digestive tract. And now a second robot could come and could go to the wound to patch it or deposit medicine. These robots are actually not toxic to the body. They're made out of food. This robot is made out of sausage casing so that it is digestible. And the idea of the mini surgeon is that you can create incision-free procedures where the robots can be used to obtain tissue samples, to stop bleeding, or to get better views inside our bodies, all without incisions. So how do we use computation to design these origami robots? We have explored several ideas. Here's one we call additive folding. So we can create any 3D object, for example, the bunny in this picture, by taking a picture, slicing it in layers, unfolding the layers, and then printing the 2D result, and then refolding it. And the interesting thing is that most of the steps are already possible due to existing software and technology. Here you can see an example of what the construction process looks like. And so for instance, we can create this bunny that has built-in controllable degrees of freedom because of the folding process. With this approach, we can make any regular object from our environment, and we can make it animatronic and roboticized. For instance, if we were to turn the Sydney Opera House into a robot, this is what we'd get. So imagine if we could make any object in our environment into a robotic tool. We would be empowered like Mickey in The Sorcerer's Apprentice in Fantasia to coordinate our world. So we've also looked at the impact of these robots in manufacturing and industrial robotics. And here you can see an example of using origami as a skeleton inside a soft body. And it turns out that by doing this, by taking a soft body and incorporating an origami structure in it, we can generate very high payload for the robot. In fact, this gripper that is shaped like a tulip, it's not non-traditional gripper has the ability to lift hundreds of times its weight. For example, we can have a linear actuator that weighs 3 grams, and that linear actuator will be able to lift up to 3 kilograms. And we can further add sensors to these robots so that they can be both delicate to pick up a potato chip and strong to pick up a bottle of wine. Thus addressing one of the motivating questions I posed at the beginning of the talk: can we have a soft robot that can be both delicate and strong, just like the elephant trunk? We can make this kind of origami robot that combines the soft body with the origami skeleton at large scale. So here you can see a crawling robot where every module is about 1 meter long. So this robot is nearly 3 meters long. And you can see a walker. Again, each leg of this walker is about 1 meter long. And we can have this the soft robot traverse very compliantly on flat terrain, on sand, on grass, on a whole variety of terrains. The movie is a little bit slow, so let me move on and say that we can also have large grippers that can pick up big things like tires and other large structures. So you can see the scale here. And we can then have everyday objects that get augmented with these roboticized modules. For instance, you can have a chair that will allow you to slouch if you want to relax, or force you to be to have a good pose, to have your body in an ergonomically good position if you have to give a talk. Now, many of the robots that you have seen have been designed automatically when they were origami robots, but some parts of the design remain manual. And we have been very interested in asking the question of, can we co-design the body of the robot and the control of the robot so that the robot is optimized for a task, both through body and through control system, through brain. And recently, we have begun to explore the possibility of a robot grammar, where the grammar consists of input components, and the input components represent the kind of modules that we can stitch together to make a machine, and rules about how these components can combine. And here's an example of a grammar we have used for the task of building a legged robot that is optimized for a particular type of terrain, maybe climbing stairs, or walking very fast over flat terrain, or jumping over gaps. And so you can see some of the rules and the results that come out of a system that implements the grammar, combines it with a simulation system to see how the grammar does, and also combines it with an optimization engine that iterates and searches until we get a good design. So using this computational approach to the co-design of body and brain results in very interesting structures. Here you can see a robot, the robot shape that was found by our system and that is optimized for jumping over gaps. And then you can see a different shape that is optimized for going very fast on flat terrain. And there are yet other shapes that we can get for going upstairs, or going around obstacles, or going on terrain with other types of properties. With this approach, we can greatly reduce the time it takes to go from concept to a functional design. And once we finalize our design, we can then transfer it to fabrication. We can then create a physical embodiment of the simulated prototype. We can do this for hard-bodied robots. We can also do this for soft robots. And in this video, you see the approach, this grammar-based and optimization-based approach for creating a soft starfish robot. In this case, we close the loop between the simulation system and the physical prototype by an additional step. And the step is system identification. So we generate in simulation a design, and then we build a design. We do system identification on it. We extract the parameters. We adjust the simulator with the new parameters, and we start the process all over. And by doing a number of iterations where the parameters used by the simulation engine are closer and closer to the real parameters, we get better and better performance. Now, this example gets us closer to the brain of the robot. So we talked about body plus brain and the importance of thinking about both of them. Our co-design approach uses computation, uses optimization, machine learning, and simulation to design automatically both the body and the control system of the robot. I want to spend a few minutes talking a little bit more about the brain of the robot and especially the role of machine learning in this process. And so I want to start by asking, well, how do you get robots to screw in a light bulb, or how many robots does it take to screw in a light bulb? Well, the answer is you need two hands. And if these hands are soft and compliant, then the robot will do very well. But have a look at how the two hands actually do different things. One hand grasps from the side, the other hand grasps from the top. How do we know how to do this? Well, it turns out that we can build machine learning solutions to solve a lot of these tasks, to solve, to add intelligence to the robot so that the robot knows how to grasp the objects. And in fact, many of the solutions that we are currently developed for robots, for machine learning, use a deep learning approach where, as you all know, deep learning uses data, usually millions of hand-labeled examples, to determine the weights that correspond to each node in the convolutional neural network. So for instance, if the data is images, we can have labeled pictures like this to say beach, palm, sea, so that when an unlabeled image like this one gets presented to the network, the system can say beach. Okay, so the process itself has multiple steps that occur in some sense that occur in a variety of applications, and independent of the type of data used to train them. In the context of images, the first step is a syntactic step. It's called image segmentation, where we look at an image and we try to group together the pixels that belong to the same object. The second step is object recognition and labeling. That is the semantic step of associating the object with a label. So in general, we have a syntactic step and a semantic step. The syntactic step is usually done well by machines. So here you can see computer generated segmentations. The semantic steps are usually done by people. And in fact, this is a big drawback of machine learning. We can apply the same ideas to different types of data. I wanted to share what happens when you train a machine learning engine to work with language. Here you can see the progress over time of various machine learning models for language. These are called transformers. And in particular, I'd like to call your attention to the GPT-3 transformer, which was introduced last summer. And it was trained on roughly 500 billion words. This means every book ever written and all public text available. This model consists of 175 billion parameters, and the training cost was approximately $4.6 million in electrical power. So huge computation. But we get something we get a very accurate a language model that can be easily instantiated to applications. And this model is really great. For instance, you can ask it why, or you can ask it, are there animals with 3 legs? And it will say, no, there are no animals with 3 legs. And then you can say, why don't animals have 3 legs? and the system will generate. Animals don't have 3 legs because they would fall over. This is very interesting. This information was not explicitly coded, but the system was able to infer this. So we get good performance, but at the cost of a lot of computation and huge size. There are a few other drawbacks to machine learning and to deep learning in particular. And for instance, if you look at this example, you have 2 pictures of dogs, which should look the same to you. But in fact, there is a slight difference between the 2 pictures. There is a little bit of noise that was injected in the left picture to generate the the right picture. And this is enough to trick the machine learning system that correctly identifies the first picture as a dog to say the second picture is an ostrich. And this kind of mistake is okay for some applications, but for safety critical systems, such as robots, this is not okay. I will show you one more video. And here you see an 18-month-old child who watches an adult and a task for the very first time and is able to figure out what the adult wants to do. And also is able to figure out a task, an action that will help the adult. And currently, we don't have AI systems. We don't have the knowledge that can allow us to write programs for machines that can do what this child can do. This remains a grand challenge for cognition and for intelligence. So we have some advancements in AI and machine learning. We also have some challenges. The challenges are around data availability and obtaining massive data sets that require manual labeling. We also have issues around data quality, and this is because the performance of the machine learning model is only as good as the data used to train it. If the data is bad, the performance will be bad. If the data has bias, the performance will be biased. We also have issues around privacy, around computation, around the fact that these huge models are so big, it's impossible to say what is happening inside them. And then we have brittleness, like you have seen in the case of the dog example. We also have some societal challenges which we need to think about as we build these more and more capable systems. So for instance, the spread of machine learning and AI is making our lives easier, or we believe this is the case. But many of the roles that it can play will displace work done by humans. So how do we anticipate and respond to the potential inequality this could create? Also, the lack of interpretability in these systems can lead to significant issues around trust and privacy. And we need to address these issues. We need to develop an ethics and legal framework for how to use AI for the greater good. The spread of misinformation was obviously a big topic during our elections in 2020. And as deepfakes get better and better, this problem is becoming more and more more and more urgent. So it's really important to think about these problems. And I'd like to observe that these problems are not like the pandemic, which just came. We know these problems are coming, and we can begin to think about solutions at the intersection of technology and policy. So given this, we also have a lot of opportunities. The AI community is working on all these challenges on the technology side and on the societal side, and we have a lot of opportunities to innovate. I would like to highlight two. I would like to highlight our opportunities to build more efficient systems that can learn, and that can learn in a way that is usable in safety critical systems like robots. And then I would also like to say something about how machines and people can work together. And I'd like to illustrate how we can make more capable brains, more interpretable brains for robots by using an example from autonomous driving. So autonomous driving has been in the press for many years. It has been in the technical literature since the 1990s. And the typical solution for a self-driving car is usually, okay, this is my sign to hurry up. The typical solution for a self-driving car has a pipeline that involves a sequence of steps. So first, using the sensors on board the robot looks at the road and figures out what's happening around it. It detects obstacles. It figures out where it is relative to a big map, and then it figures out where to go, and finally it actuates that path. And so the key idea here is to break the problem and solve each of these subproblems individually. And there are so many works that address each of these subproblems. Now, in practice, this approach can be challenging because it requires hand engineering of parameters for each one of these subproblems. And then also it requires hand engineering of the connections between these modules. And so a natural question is, can we do better if we can learn these parameters? These parameters have to be fine-tuned for every situation. If the car drives at night, if the car drives on roads with lane markings, without markings, in the woods, in the city, if it rains. So for each one of these cases, this pipeline has to have special parameters. We'd like to see whether it's possible to learn a policy rather than these parameterized solutions. And so our approach has been to consider developing an end-to-end learning strategy where we want to learn from humans. We want to learn by watching humans, and we want to go directly from raw images to actuation. Well, it turns out we've been able to do that, and here is an example of the MIT autonomous robot car that is using our end-to-end machine learning solution to drive in a completely different environment than where it was trained. This car was trained with urban data by watching people how they drive in the city, and now here is the vehicle operating in a rural environment. And the vehicle is able to steer, to follow the road. It's able to navigate intersections, ultimately getting to the destination. Now, if we look under the hood, if we look inside the engine of this vehicle, this is what happens. So let me explain this video to you. On the lower right, you see the map, and you see in red how the car navigates on this map. In the upper left, you see the camera input stream. In the lower left, you see the attention map. This is where in the image is the system using in order to make the decision about what to do next. And then you see some small rectangular boxes. Those are convolutional layers that are there to process the input stream. And then the decision making of this vehicle is the big rectangular box with yellow, green, and blue blinking lights. There are over 100,000 neurons in this decision engine and over 500,000 parameters. So the system works pretty well, but we have no idea what is going on. It's impossible to see any correlations between these blinking lights and vehicle behavior. Now, inspired by the natural world. So here's a picture where you can see a representation of this decision-making engine on the left. But inspired by the natural world, we have come up with a new approach to machine learning we call neural circuit policies. And this approach is different from traditional deep learning in several ways. First, in deep learning, every neuron computes a very simple function. It computes a thresholding or a step function. In neural circuit policies, we allow the neurons to compute a differential equation. Furthermore, this differential equation can have a varying time component, parameters, sorry. Second, in the deep network circuits, the structure, the architecture is kind of standardized with each neuron being playing a uniform role. In neural circuit policies, we have specialized neurons. So for instance, we can have command neurons, we have motor neurons, we have sensory neurons. And the architecture of this neural circuit policy is inspired by subarchitectures that we see in some biological systems. Okay, so if we change our notion of what a neuron is so that it can be specialized and it can compute this differential equation with what we call liquid time parameter, then we can achieve the same thing we achieved in the previous system with over 100,000 nodes using 19 nodes only. And so now here is the same video as before. The decision-making engine is represented with the blinking lights on the right, and it's only 19 nodes. We can correlate what these nodes do with the action of the vehicle. Also, the attention map of this solution is focused, it's much more focused than the previous solution, which means that this neural network system is making decisions by looking at the horizon and the side of the road. And so we're very excited about the possibility of neural circuit policies because they can enable more interpretable solutions for safety critical applications, where for sure autonomous driving is one of them, one of the applications that requires this kind of safety critically sensitive solution. We can take this idea and we can apply neural circuits policies to other problems. In this video, you can see a neural circuit policy that has only 9 neurons and performs much better than people at hitting waypoints, at driving this plane to touch waypoints. On the left, you only have 1 degree of freedom control. We can only control the pitch, and we have 9 neurons. On the right, we have full degree of freedom control, and we have 24 neurons. So this is very, very exciting. Now, with these kinds of ideas, I believe that the brains of the robots for safety critical applications can become much more interpretable and much more compact and much more suited for the kind of applications where we want robots to operate well in. I hope that through these examples you have seen, you see that we do have opportunities that allow us to reimagine robots, what they look like, what they can do, and how they can support us with physical tasks. Now, while the last 60 years have been devoted to industrial robots that were inspired by the human form, I believe that the next 60 years will belong to pervasive machines, pervasive robots that will have a wide range of capabilities that will come in a variety of forms and materials inspired by nature, by the built environment, and by our imagination. As we consider doing this work, we also need to be very careful about what these machines can do, what the machines should do, what they shouldn't do, and what they must do. But I believe the future has so many great opportunities for us. And I'd like to close by giving you a vision of what might be possible. Imagine waking up enabled by a personal assistant that figures out the optimal time and helps you organize your outfit and helps you collect all the items you need for the day. As you walk by a store, the image in the store window will display your picture with the latest fashion on your body. And then inside the store, shopping will become bespoke because we will have tools that allow us to allow the shop to take measurements of your body and ensure that whatever gets created fits you perfectly. And we might even have computation embedded in our clothing. For instance, we might have fibers that allow us to program the color our clothing can take, maybe to match the clothing of a friend. At work, inspired by embedding intelligence in all the objects around us, we could have smart rooms where temperature gets adjusted automatically by monitoring people's comfort level. And gestures could be used to pull up and modify diagrams of the things being discussed. For example, a new design for a flying car. And these new flying cars could be connected with the IT infrastructure. They would know your needs so that they can tell you, for example, that you can buy the plants you've been wanting nearby after a small detour. Back at home, you can have intelligent robotic bikes with training wheels that appear and disappear according to your skill level. You can have robots that help with planting a garden, and robots that deliver your shopped items in garbage bins that can take themselves out. And after a good day, when it's time for a bedtime story, we could have possibilities that allow us to enter the story and, let's say, interact with a dragon. The possibilities for the field, for the field at the intersection of robotics, materials, computer science, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering are extraordinary. And the advances that we are able to make in science today will shape our future with machines. I would like to observe that today, when you can think about something, you can write it, you can put it on paper. But imagine a world where if you can think it, you can make it. A world where any one of us can make our own interpretation of the robotic undersea explorer. The scientific advancement of computational thinking and computational making and robotics could give every single one of us these kinds of superpowers. Every single one of us could use our talents, our creativity, our problem-solving skills to dream up robots that take us places we can't physically go, that entertain us, that communicate us, that support us with physical work. In a future of democratized access to robots, there are so many possibilities, and I'm so excited for what will come in the next 5 to 10 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniela. That was a wonderful talk. It's great to see something that is both so educating and entertaining at the same time. I'm sure we've all enjoyed that very much, and I certainly have also been made exceedingly jealous by anyone who manages to combine technology and scuba diving in the same job. I think that's definitely an achievement. Well, we have lots of questions. Thank you to everybody who's been sending those through, and we've tried to group those into some rough topics here. One of them is about communicating with robots, between humans and robots, and some of this comes from a question by Serge Reddy. Are there particular challenges to do with communicating with robots which are in the real world with us? A lot of communication with machines at the moment is to abstract devices that are somewhat more less aware of the same surroundings that we're in. And are there any particular frameworks that, for example, enable language to be mapped well to the models of the world that a robot might have?
That's an excellent question. In fact, I usually emphasize the interaction with machines as a third pillar for enabling this kind of world with pervasive robots. Language is such an important aspect of intelligence, and while a lot of the work in robotics is about making machines do things, in the recent past, a wide range of projects has addressed how to add natural language to machines. How can we enable machines and people to share a language, to talk in natural language? And there has been a lot of progress in that direction. My own perspective is that most of the machines we have built so far are built in such a way that we have to understand their constraints and their own language. What I would really like is a world where machines adapt to us rather than the other way around. Machines can watch us, can get an understanding of the tasks we are involved in. Machines get an understanding of how we can be helped, just like the 18-month-old figured out how the adult needed to be helped. We don't have this work, but we have many challenges, and there's a great deal of interest in pushing the boundaries in this direction. Now, having said that, there are a number of cool projects that are looking at sensorizing our bodies so that we can communicate via gesture, that are combining gestures with language. There is even work that is looking at whether we can make any sense out of our brain activity to map that, to go directly from brain function to robot control. That is a very challenging and ambitious question. But nevertheless, there are efforts that are aiming to advance in this direction. And I think that if we make progress, we will do much more than create an engineered solution to how machines and people interact, and much more than create more capable machines. We will advance computer science, we will advance machine learning, and we will also get insights into intelligence, into what makes us intelligent, what makes us able to coordinate. And I want to thank you for that question, because it also gives me an opportunity to tell you about a new project that just started. And this project is a collaboration across many universities. And this project aims to develop tools that will help us understand the language of whales and eventually talk back to them. So we are focused on understanding sperm whales. We have a lot of data about their communication patterns. We're trying to correlate that with physical movement. And we hope that eventually we will figure out something about the structure and communication of whales. And if we can do that, we will necessarily advance machine learning, and we will necessarily advance our tools that enable us to connect not just to other machines, but also to other species, to our neighbors on this planet.
That brings on very nicely. We had a question about, do we have much experience on how happy animals are interacting with robots? You used the example of the cat having a robotic friend to play with. But I think there's a more general question here from Mihai Buyanka. Apologies, Mihai, if I'm butchering your name, who wrote, mind and body were shaped together by evolution in animals, and intelligence is one of the results of evolution. Meanwhile, much of the AI community regards embodiment as unnecessary or too messy to deal with. In your view, how important is embodiment in creating intelligent systems that generalize better than our current methods?
Well, I believe it's super important. I'm devoting a lot of my time to study embodiment, and I think that considering the deep interaction between body and brain is super important for advancing to the next stage. Because by developing separately the body of the machine and the brain of the machine, by employing a sequential approach to body and brain, we will be limited. We will miss a lot of opportunities for this kind of co-evolution. The work I have shown with robot grammar aims at exactly the core of that question. And so the good news is that we have scientists who are beginning to think along these directions. But we are at the beginning, so we have a long way ahead of us. I do think that there will be interesting insights into intelligence. And so, yes, you're right. A lot of the AI tasks are greatly simplified by removing the physical world. But we have a huge opportunity in computer science to consider computation for interaction with the physical world. We have a huge opportunity for considering how continuous models rather than discrete models impact computation. We have a huge opportunity to think about uncertainty, which doesn't really occur in the graph world, but it occurs as a fundamental presence in the physical world and in the way we communicate with machines. So I see this work on robotics and on embodied computation as also as a way of expanding the scope of computer science from a very clean machine-centric world to the physical world, where we have to deal with continuity, we have to deal with physics, we have to deal with uncertainty.
Thank you. We have a lot of interest in your flexible robots. What are the soft robots made up of? Someone asks, can we use substances like graphene, which are both strong and flexible, for making them? And Sean Davidson asks a very practical question of how quickly can your fishtail cycle from side to side? It would be interesting to know more about the construction of these.
Yeah, so we use, so the fish is made out of silicon. We have used a wide range of materials to make soft robots. We have used paper, we have used food, we have used a variety of plastics and silicone. So, I mean, essentially any material that is available to us can be used to create a machine. We have an education project where we presented a curriculum for building robots out of paper. And so our school kids can print the design flat. It's an origami design. They can print the design flat, cut it, and manually turn it into a functional machine. And that's very exciting because kids somehow are fascinated by machines, and they seem to be interested in spending huge amounts of time building things that then they can control. Maybe it's because they feel that adults control them all the time, so now they have the ability to control something themselves. So we actually built a robotic garden for the purposes of education, and those robots are built out of paper and plastic. Now going back, so in a nutshell, you can use anything to build machines. The fishtail can be controlled to undulate according to whatever we wish to do for our control program. And so, for instance, I have shown you an example where the fishtail can bend in 100 milliseconds. And this is really critical. So this allows the robot to completely change the swimming direction in 100 milliseconds. For the robot fish that we took to the coral reef, we used a harder material because that robot had to deal with currents. And so we needed somehow stiffness as well as softness, and we can oscillate back and forth fast. But for the purposes of swimming, the oscillation was on the order of a couple of seconds. 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second.
Well, sort of related to that. Obviously, there's this new interest in flexible, soft actuators. What about sensors? And more generally, obviously, sensors are a very important part of robots. What do you think are the big unaddressed challenges that the sensor network community needs to deal with?
Well, sensors are super important. And so what I would really like is skins on our robots. I would like for the robots to have, to get a distributed sensing system that is very dense and gives the robots the sense of touch. It gives the robots the ability to see the world through touch, just like we do. And so that is coming. It is so we are beginning to see progress with flexible electronics and with small, tiny sensors embedded in the flexible electronics. Of course, we are limited by how we build our sensors. And so we don't have, for instance, a laser scanner that will be at a small enough form factor to be integrated in the kind of robotic fish that I have shown you. But imagine a huge robot where we could encase the laser scanner into a soft enclosure, so that in fact the materials, the electronics inside it, become a kind of the core or the skeleton, but the outside remains soft and compliant. So that's a possibility for the future. There are many issues, both on the design side and on the computational side. If we get to the point where we have this kind of high density skin level sensing for our machines.
Splendid, thank you. Now, I'm conscious that we have a limited amount of time left and we have more questions than we're going to get through, but for those who have asked questions, we will forward them to Daniela so that she does at least know what your questions were as a result. I think we could talk perhaps a little bit more about more general issues here. Maybe I'll just read some of these to you and you can deal with the general overall picture. There's an emerging area of small robots that can even operate without batteries. What advances in technologies are required to make them ubiquitous? What do you see as the largest technical challenges to widespread adoption of AI and robotics in society, especially in the safety critical domains you've mentioned? Someone asks, you mentioned, this is Wenjia Wang, you mentioned the reliability of deep neural models as they could be relatively easily fooled or poisoned with adversarial data. What do you think we should do to make robots controlled by AI systems more secure and reliable in more critical environments? And I guess perhaps more generally to wrap this up, I was thinking of Mark Weiser's idea back from the 80s and 90s of ubiquitous computing, something we sort of take for granted now, but the idea that you no longer talk about computers when they become so embedded in your environment that you don't think of them, you think of the computer on your wrist as a watch, not as a computer. And when do you think we'll actually stop using the word robot? Will we overcome these challenges enough that they are so embedded in society that we don't think of them as robots anymore?
Yes, let's see, what was his famous quote? I was so inspired by that.
When they disappear.
The best technologies are those that disappear. They become embedded in the fabric of everyday life, and we forget about them. He said it much more eloquently, but that was something like that. The best technologies are those that disappear. I think that was the famous line he had. So I agree. I would love to get to the point where we really have AI and robotic tools that are around us, and that are tools. We don't get surprised. Oh, here's the robot car, right? There is a robot car. Yes, of course, it's normal that the robot car is down the road. So I'm very excited about that potential, but we do have a long way to go in order to get there, both on the AI side and on the robotic side. And I separate them because I think we have the potential for huge impact with tools that help us with cognitive work, and also tools that help us with physical work. But we have to understand those tools better. We have to trust those tools. Those tools have to be way more reliable. On the AI side, for safety critical applications, we really need interpretability. Without interpretability, we just don't know what's going to happen. And so we need interpretability, we need robustness, we need trustworthy computing. And I think that this gives us an opportunity to think about new models for computation. Because let's face it, the deep learning solutions that we are deploying today are due to decades-old ideas. Without new ideas, we will be plowing the same field and the results will become increasingly more incremental. So we really do need new ways to think about the problem. We need new ideas. And in fact, our effort with neural circuit policies is a way of challenging the existing models by saying, well, do we really have to have hundreds of thousands of neurons? Do they have to be so simple? Do they all have to be the same? Can we empower each neuron? And instead of making models that are increasingly bigger and bigger and bigger, I want my models to be smaller and smaller and smaller, because then they will be more understandable, they will be more compact, they will require less computation and less training. And so that's one idea. It's an idea. It's also an opportunity to connect neuroscience with computer science to see whether the latest advancement in neuroscience can inspire different types of models. I didn't tell you because I ran out of time, but a number of biological organisms have this kind of differential equation computation at the level of each neuron. And so, for instance, there is a species of worms called C. elegans, where the robot, so not the robot, I see everything as robots, where the organism has 300 neurons. And each neuron was characterized by biologists as doing this kind of differential equation computation. And these 300 neurons are sufficient to navigate, to find food, to have a good life. So why do we need hundreds of millions of parameters and of neurons in order to make machines that do the same tasks, that navigate, for instance?
Thank you very much. We've got so many other good questions. I'm sorry to everybody who's asked them that we haven't had time to cover them now, but we hope maybe we'll be able to invite Daniela back at some point and we can carry on. I'd like to hand back to Anne now to say goodbye.
So I'd like to thank Daniela so much for that inspiring talk, a really magical talk, I'd say. I love the fact that you're talking about the embodiment so much. But, it's not just that you've got brilliant videos. I think it's so important to think about how these robots interact with us and how computation interacts with us in general. And there's so many ideas there, so many things that people can talk about. And yeah, it's a very interesting time when I hear about people talking about C. elegans twice in 2 days. There's lots and lots going on, which your talk has touched on. So thank you so much for that. And before I want to say goodbye, I also want to say thank you to Joyce, to Quentin, and also to the people behind the scenes who've been working on this, in particular Ben and Helen and Joe. And thank you so much to everybody who's joined us today and asked all these brilliant questions. I think this is the best set of questions we've ever had in a Wheeler lecture. So yeah, that's great. And yes, who knows how we meet next year, but yeah, so again, thank you, Daniela, and please do come to Cambridge and give us another talk. And we would like to see you as embodied as well.
Thank you so much. I look forward to visiting in person, and it was a great honor to be with you today.